Okay, so C# for busy people, coding in natural language. Today we'll have a look at Visual Studio's Copilot to help you code in C# today. So there's a little bit of setup involved. First, you want to go install Visual Studio Code. The link is on the slides if you have access to them, or alternatively, you can just Google for it, Visual Studio Code, you'll find it. Next, you want to create a GitHub account. So go to GitHub, sign up, set an email, username, and password, all that jazz. Then you want to go, once Visual Studio is installed, link Visual Studio to Unity. So inside of Unity, go to Preferences, External Tools, Visual Studio Code as your external script editor. This isn't technically necessary, but it makes things easier in the long run. Next, you want to go into Visual Studio Code and click this little pilot icon on the top right next to the search bar and click sign in to use Copilot for free. It will then prompt you to log into GitHub, which you will gladly do because that then gives you a new friend for life. Next, inside of your Unity project, you want to set up a scripts folder. This one is technically optional, but I like to do it just to keep tidy. So set up a scripts folder, and this is where you're going to save all of your scripts in the future. Okay, cool. So what is Copilot? Copilot is a ChatGPT model embedded in Visual Studio Code that is geared to help you code. And it's amazing. So what can it do? It can write a script from scratch, for example. So yeah, Copilot can write scripts from scratch. So basically any idea that you have where you're not sure, how can I do this in Unity? You can always go and ask Copilot, how can I do this in Unity? In this case, I just went ahead and described to it a specific idea that I had. So you want to be as precise as you can and try not to make the prompt too long. Because once the prompt is like, half of a book, at some point, Copilot is going to be like, hey, listen, this is a bit too much for me to parse. Like, I'm just a large language model. Please chill. So it can handle like a surprisingly long prompt, but just don't go overboard with it. Also, like, make sure like the script that you're working on isn't getting out of hand. Like at some point it just starts to hallucinate. And also use your understanding of Unity to give Copilot necessary context. Otherwise it will just assume context. So let's have a look at this prompt. My prompt is, please write a script for Unity that takes as input two game objects, player and object. The script will be attached to an object with a 3D box collider set to trigger. When the player enters the trigger, enable the object. Before the trigger is entered, make sure the object is disabled. So you can already tell this prompt is formatted, if you want to say it like this, in a way that is geared toward programming, right? So I'm giving quite exact instructions on what I want it to do because I have an idea of how I want the script to be working. If I don't have an idea on how the script is going to work, I'm just going to type in basically, hey, I have this object that I want to only be visible, or that I want to appear when the player walks to a certain point in the game. And that will probably also work, right? In this case, I used my knowledge of Unity, my understanding of Unity, to provide Copilot with precise instructions on how I want the script to function, but you can get there without it. Right? If you don't give it these precise instructions, it's just gonna assume them and figure out a way to do it anyways. So let's see what it does. Okay, great. So it spit out this code. It's not very long. It also gave us some instructions on how to use the code. This is great. So we always want to go and test our code, obviously, right? It's not magic. It can make mistakes. So what we want to do is click these three dots up here, and it's going to open up a menu, and there you can just click insert into new file, which is going to bring you into a new little tab in your editor. And next you have to save the script, obviously, to get it into Unity. And it's very important that the file name is not arbitrary. The script is going to have a public class heading, and then it's gonna give a name, right? So in this case, it's trigger enable object. You can change this name if you want to, but the important thing is at the end, like you copy this exact name, then you hit Command-Shift-Save, or you go to File and Save As if you're a manual type of person. You want to paste the name in there and add a .cs to tell it that it's a C# script. Then you want to select your scripts folder and save it there. So in this example, we have trigger enable object.cs saved to my personal scripts folder here. Okay, great. So let's check back with Copilot and see its instructions on how to apply the script. So yeah, we created a script. Okay, we copy and paste it and save the script. Great. So attach the script to the game object with the 3D box collider set to trigger. In the Unity editor, assign the player and object to enable fields in the script component to the respective game objects in your scene. Okay, let's have a look what that's like. So, okay, we have our appear trigger object. It's set to trigger. Great. So this is my scripts folder. I'm just gonna search enable trigger enable object. Now there's a couple of ways to get the script on here, right? You can just drag and drop it into the hierarchy like so. You can see it appeared here. Another smooth way to do it is just click add component and type the name of your script, and you'll be able to figure it, to find it and assign it here. Or third option, just drag it straight into the inspector. So now we have 3 scripts. Let's just get rid of the redundant ones and assign the objects. You can just do this by dragging and dropping. That's the nice thing about the way that this is set up. Bam, bam, and now it knows what's the player and what is the object to disable or enable. Okay, cool. Please don't play again, thank you. Let's go and see if it works. I have another video here, shocker. Okay, so this is my scene. It's gonna take a little moment to start, but yeah, okay, it's just started up. We can see this monitor stand that was just here disappeared. So that's already the first thing the script is supposed to do. And if we walk into this trigger box, we can see that nothing is happening. Okay. So that takes us to the next step, debugging. Yay! So the first thing you want to do in debugging is always observe and explain the behavior, right? So if we go back for a hot second, we can see the monitor stand is here, right? This is the object that I want to enable. Once the script is loaded, the monitor disappears, so we know the script is doing something. But when I'm in the trigger, it doesn't appear. Okay, so let's tell Copilot exactly that. The script is not working as intended. It disables the object, but when the player enters the trigger, nothing happens. Please help me debug this. Add debug statements to the script and explain to me how exactly triggers work. So we're doing 3 things here. Explaining the problem, adding debug statements, and asking for information on things that we're unsure about. This is a great way to learn. Always do this. If there's something that you don't understand, but you think that it might be relevant for you, just ask Copilot to explain it. It'll gladly do it. Cool. So it spat out a new script, including our debug statements. And here's something that you're also going to be doing all the time when you're working with Copilot, is hitting this little button here and applying your script. So this is basically just going to make Copilot apply all of its changes to the script that you already have. So great, we'll do that. And then we have these nice little debug statements in there. We'll have a look at them in just a second. First, we want to apply the script changes, save, and then return to Unity. Always remember to save your changes. Cool, so these are the debug messages. What these do is basically they will show up in the console when the containing method is called, right? So in this case, we have this onTriggerEnter method, for example, which will then spit out the debug message trigger entered by game object name, which is going to be the player, right? So we want to see this to make sure that the trigger, is working, right? There's also more messages here. For example, this debug log object disabled at start and object to enable is not assigned. This is just a nice little statement that basically makes sure we use our script correctly, right? If we don't assign an object to be enabled, then this is going to tell us, hey, yo, you forgot about this. You're not like using your own script, right, dummy? And then we can go back and like remember, oh yeah, this is how it's set up. Cool. Okay, right, so we want to see this, otherwise we know this isn't working. And then there's also some more debugging. Player entered the trigger. Object enabled and object to enable is not assigned, right? We would see these respectively if their containing methods are called. And so this way we can tell where exactly our script is breaking. Let's have a little look at what that's like. So the script is running, we're walking into the trigger box, and so we would be assuming that trigger entered by would be showing up in the console now. The console, you can't really see it so well, but the console is, I can't go into full screen because I'm already in full screen. The console is down here, right? You can see my mouse cursor. If you click it, you can pull it up. And okay, we can see object disabled at start. So this method has been called successfully, but this is where it breaks. Cool, so we know that onTriggerEnter is not working. Let's proceed with our newfound knowledge. Yeah, we know now onTriggerEnter is not working. Okay, cool. How do you know that? Because the debug statement doesn't show up. Great. Cool. So Copilot also gave us some debugging steps. We want to check the console output. Yep, we already did that. We know the trigger is not working. We want to make sure that the game objects are properly assigned. We also made sure that these are properly assigned. But then here's step 2, verify collider and rigid body. Ensure that the game object with the trigger collider has the isTrigger checkbox checked. We verified that. Also make sure that either the player or the trigger object has a rigid body component attached. Okay, cool. Let's go check colliders and rigid body. Aha. Neither on our appear trigger object nor on the player we can find a rigid body. So that's gotta be it, right? Let's add a rigid body. And here's where things get a little bit tricky, right? Because when you start using AI, it's easy for you to just like zone out, shut your brain off, and just make it do all the work. But it's just like using AI for creative writing, for example, or like to help you with an essay. You never want to just have the AI hallucinate on its own and just like do whatever it wants to. You always have to be on the loop. You always have to make sure that you're actually engaging with what's happening. Because in this case, there's a clue that's going to be important soon that you will see when you're adding the rigid body component. Can anybody tell me what it is? Yeah, I'm in a room alone right now and I asked a question that I know the answer to. So, okay, I'm just going to be a student for a second. There's 2 different rigid body components. One that just says rigid body and one that says rigid body 2D. Yes, very good student. Excellent. So, now I'm not exactly sure, like, should I just be using rigid body? Should I be using rigid body 2D? Like, what's happening? I have a 2D game, after all. So I don't know the answer to your question. I ask Copilot. When adding a rigid body component to the object, I realized there's a rigid body and a rigid body 2D component. My game is in 2D. Does this make a difference? And Copilot goes, yeah, it makes a significant difference actually. If your game is in 2D, you should be using 2D colliders and rigid body 2D components instead of their 3D counterparts. The methods for handling triggers in 2D are also different. Let's update your script to use 2D components and methods. Okay, cool. So it goes ahead and changes that. Basically, it's just, like the, instead of onTriggerEnter, it's onTriggerEnter 2D. And then instead of collider, it's collider 2D, right? But yeah, this stuff makes a difference. You're making 3D games, so this is not necessarily important to you. But if you want to make the jump to 2D or if you have any other issue, this is how you figure out what's going on, right? So if you don't know that there are these little like differences sometimes, then you're just screwed because Copilot is not going to read your Unity project and tell you, hey, dummy, you told me to use a 3D collider as your trigger, but your game is in 2D. So you have to keep your eyes open for stuff like this. And if you find a blind spot, ask Copilot about it. It's an AI. It won't judge. You can ask it the stupidest questions. It'll just happily answer. So, all right, cool. I made all the necessary changes. I used 2D colliders and chucked the rigid body 2D on there. Let's check it out and see what happens. Okay. Okay, so my trigger is now just falling off the map. Yeah, that's fun. Hey, Copilot, I added a rigid body to the trigger object, but now it just falls off the screen when I play. What's going on here? I'm scared and alone. And Copilot goes, no need to worry. The issue you're experiencing is because the rigid body component is affected by gravity by default. Since your game is in 2D, you should use a rigid body 2D and set its body type to kinematic to prevent it from being affected by gravity. Nice. Cool. Okay, so now I know what's happening here. So I'm going into my rigid body 2D, setting its body type to kinematic. And let's check it out. Is it working now? Okay. It's no longer falling off the map. That's cool. So in just a second, I should be able to enter my trigger and hey, there we go. Monitor stand appears. The script is working. Hooray. So I know this possibly wasn't the best advertisement for, hey, I'm just gonna like use natural language to code, right? I'm just gonna come up with an idea and put it in Copilot. But this is something that you're gonna have to be dealing with all the time. It's gonna be debugging scripts, making sure they work the way that they're intended. But if you're able to get through all of that, then this is an amazing tool because you can just come up with any idea and find a way with enough dedication to get it into your game, which is great. So here are a couple of just like useful prompts generally to get you going, right? So something that I use a lot is explain the script to me. I downloaded some script off of the Unity asset store and I don't understand how it works. So I'm like, explain this to me. What does it do? What does this code snippet do? When something's not working, like I get a compile error, I just paste the error into Copilot and it'll usually tell me, hey, this and that is what you need to do. Or it'll even just go and fix my script because sometimes there's just like a using statement that's not there and it'll just go put it in. There we go. How do I implement complex idea here, right? So you have this like amazing idea and it's super complicated and you don't know like how to get started. Just ask it. You can also just use ChatGPT for it, but it's not as specifically geared for these types of questions. But ChatGPT can help you write prompts that Copilot will then understand, right? Because Copilot always tries to code something. Like you ask it a question, it's like, oh yeah, and also here's a script for you. You don't always need the script, but sometimes it's just nice to ask it, hey, how would I do this? Like, I want to make this complicated thing and I don't know the steps. Cool, here's the steps. Make 3 game objects, add these components, yada, 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 right? Okay, I don't know how add Unity component here works. Please explain it to me. Remove all the debug statements from the script. So you're done debugging something, you want all the debug statements out. You can also tell it stuff like, hey, I want to be able to enable these debug statements from the inspector. Just tell it that and it'll give you a toggle in the inspector. It's great. Or something like change the name of all variables called X to Y, right? So these are just a couple of things. Of course, the list is endless because there's just a bunch of cool stuff that you can do with this. So yeah, if we were in class right now, I go like, yo, hit me with an idea. Let's code something. You give me like an idea and I'm going to try to make it happen live for you. And if you want to like do your own thing now, you can go do your own thing. Make your own little script and see what comes of it. Great. So thanks for your attention. I hope this was useful. Yeah.